Welcome back to the Mental Space. We are at the Sakina Integrated Mental Health Conference here in Abu Dhabi. And joining me live is a man that knows all about digital well-being. Well, let's hope. Justin Thomas of SIMC, which is the digital well-being. Tell me, Justin.
Global Digital Wellbeing Program from the King Abdulaziz Center of Well Culture, also known as Ithra.
In Saudi Arabia.
Yep.
I remember, because and viewers of the podcast, you remember that we actually broadcast live from the SIMC Summit last year or the year before, when you came out with a huge report. Tell me a little bit more, because I know you're going to be on stage later talking about digital well-being. We see our young people struggling. I write reports for Cigna Healthcare, and we see, in the UAE and also in Saudi Arabia, the 18 to 24-year-old bracket really struggling with anxiety and unmanageable stress. Tell me what the work is that you're doing on that front.
Okay, so I think there's, the jury is out, the evidence isn't in. There's a lot of so there's a really popular book, many people will be familiar with it, The Anxious Generation.
Yes.
And so there is lots and lots of correlational evidence. So you kind of see this spike in many countries in anxiety, depression, even rates of suicide and self-harm around about the same time that we had an explosion of smartphones and social media amongst young people. So there's this really, if you like, smoking gun. It's correlational evidence, which for scientists is not enough. But I think some people would argue correlation isn't causation, but it is cause for concern. So a lot of the work that we do is really digging deeper on this and looking at what possible roles the digital technologies might play in mental health and also social health, increasingly looking at social health. Obviously they're all integrated. No health without mental health.
Absolutely.
No mental health without social health.
So tell me where you were at then, or where SIMC is at then in this argument, debate, journey of discovery. Where do you fall down? What are the numbers showing you?
Okay. So I think the last time we ran our survey, we looked at 35 countries, 7 world regions, and that in and of itself is quite unique. And we were particularly keen to ensure that we kind of had a good coverage of nations from the Middle East, North Africa, places that are often missing from the picture. And I think some of the big, if you like, headlines around this particular topic of, if you like, the sharper end of problematicity is that what you find in all 35 of the countries, so this will be cultural invariance, there's no exceptions. All of the countries you find a varying degree of a relationship between problematic technology use. Okay, so what we're talking about there is people who game to such an excess that it causes problems either for them in the workplace or their studies or their relationships. They use social media to an extent that their relationships are damaged by it, or their employment. So their social and functional, their occupational and social functioning is somehow dampened. In every country, we find significant rates of this. Okay. And then when we look at correlations between anxiety, depression, loneliness, again, we find the same patterns. So and this is a really important point, problematic technology use, not technology use in general. So it's really important.
Define the difference for us. From a scientific perspective.
From a scientific perspective, I think you're looking at this more from a clinical perspective. So the key, the rule of thumb, if you like, it's heuristic utility, is that if the problem impacts your functioning in terms of the world of work or the world of study, whatever your occupation is, if it impacts that detrimentally, or it really significantly impacts your social relationships, like people just can't be around you, or your relationships fall apart as a consequence of the behaviors, then we start to talk about problematicity. So there's no biomarker here. There's no there's no 2 hours is the limit. It's going to be contextually different for different people.
If we looked bigger, macro in a way, and it might be an impossible question to ask, but when we look at the rise in anxiety, as you say, the smoking gun might not be there, or the smoking gun is there, but we don't
don't
know
pull the
we
trigger.
don't know who pulled the
Yeah.
trigger. But this kind of like, we see anxiety rising. We have this constant drip feed of either polarizing content, angry content, inaccurate, fake content that's designed to manipulate us in one direction or another direction. Talk to me between the two, almost like the two different perspectives between gut instinct of what's actually happening, almost on a societal level. There'll have been a reason why, Saudi Arabia and Ithra created sync in the first place. And then where's the science at with that conversation? Because it feels very much to everybody that something's happening.
Yeah.
We just don't quite know what.
Yeah. I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Scott. And I think one of the
I rarely do that.
no, what you have, because there's lots of evidence. There's but it's scattered. There's not a unified kind of sort of position here. You kind of it's quite a polarized debate sometimes, and evidence takes a while to gather. Research doesn't move at the rate of technological innovation. So there are challenges. But I think to speak to your piece about my own intuitions around this, from my own kind of observations and from kind of data-driven intuition, what you're seeing, I think, is that it's not monocausal. So if there's a rise in anxiety and mental health problems, it's a disservice to point the finger just at one cause. Like it's smartphones. Like that smacks to me of kind of duplicitousness. But I think what you've got is I think if you think about young people are facing at least 3 major existential threats that maybe me and you didn't grow up with. One that we perhaps did. One threat we probably grew up with, which was the threat of thermonuclear annihilation.
Okay.
Another threat is, and I say threat, threat. Another or perceived threat.
Yeah.
Another one is climate change, the climate crisis.
Yeah.
And now to add to that, we also have, and again, perceived threat, if you like, a perceived threat to the future of, some people say the future of work, but I would go one step further and say the future of purpose.
Yeah.
So even if these things don't ever happen,
talking about AI, or we
talking about AI. So even if these things never happen, we still are children, young people are still inhabiting an environment where these threats are real. And just to kind of backtrack to the threat of thermonuclear annihilation, Cold War.
Yeah.
I think the APA, the American Psychiatric Association, did a study of young people growing up with that threat, so like 1980s, back end of the Cold War when it peaked. And what they found was that young people, as a consequence of that, were more nihilistic. There were even instances of nuclear night terrors, and people had less hope or optimism for the future.
Really?
And they correlated that with the rise of kind of substance misuse epidemics. So I think to ignore the threats that are in our the things we're talking about, the threats that are in our ecosystem, is arguably all part and parcel of this. And again, this is me going on intuition here.
Yeah.
So there's lots of these threats that anxiety is driven by fear of bad things that might happen. There are lots of really big fundamental bad things that might happen that people talk about. So young people are arguably quite anxious. And then I think throw into that mix digital technologies that can sometimes amplify stories. People can get locked into doom scroll type situations where they're hearing about this more often, and our natural cognitive biases then amplify the likelihood. If I've heard about something very often, it's a bigger threat than if I haven't heard about that. I haven't heard about it, it's probably not going to happen if I'm hearing about it all the time. And these are ancient brain structures that do this, like the frontal cortex can argue them away, but these things are happening in the background. And tech as feel like technology can be an amplifier. And I think the other problematic role that tech plays is it allows us to distract ourselves from these uncomfortable feelings. So psychologists talk about this concept of experiential avoidance. And when we habitually, if you like, run away from being able to sit with or process our unpleasant emotions,
Yeah.
we lose the opportunity to develop, if you like, tolerance for discomfort. We also lose the opportunity to develop, kind of more functional and adaptive problem solving skills. So I think technology is definitely in the mix, but it's certainly not this monocausal. If we ban phones or if we ban children from social media, everything's going to go back to kind of equilibrium, whenever that was, or whatever that golden age was.
Was there a golden age though?
Yeah,
Because every time I
exactly.
think back to it, I remember my childhood absolutely sucked. But anyway, we always perceived that things were better. So I know this is me trying to have a conversation with a scientist, and I left school with 5 GCSEs. But you read, or I've read about the fact that as we walk through the world, we collect so much data that we don't even know that we're collecting, because we couldn't process every single piece of information that hits our brains.
Yeah,
If I was to go back 30 years ago, I would imagine / assume that maybe we were soaking up less polarizing, destructive, negative, angry headlines, information, because it's being fed to us. When we say amplified, is that a factor in the fact that there's actually more of this than there's ever been?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. What you've got is you've got like you've got this exponential growth in information, but the human ability to process information is unchanged since the Neolithic, arguably.
Okay.
Like we've got a finite capacity to process
My wife often calls me a caveman.
Yeah, no, we have caveman brain. Yeah,
Yeah.
what was that I like to say? We are kind of, we're a Nokia phone inside an iPhone 17 case. We kind of have the wetware of our Neolithic ancestors.
Yeah.
So we haven't increased our capacity to, if you like, process information or pay attention. It's the whole idea of the attention economy.
Yeah.
And as there's ever increasingly exponentially more and more information, if that information wants our attention, it has to compete. So it has to get loud, it has to get clever, it has to get sneaky, it has to, it has to foster intimacy. Don't listen to anybody else, just talk. The kind of the chatbot sycophantic approach. So
Yeah.
there really is a drive. I mean, human attention is the new gold. Some people describe
I
it
remember
as
the attention economies, and I remember watching a documentary even about Facebook and Meta, which would basically say, look, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. Yeah.
Exactly.
And again, we're also, I mean, not to demonize social media, but I do love to demonize social media. It's almost like, it's not necessarily the technology, it's what we do with it.
Yeah, 100%. I think, not to let technology totally off the hook. I think it is. So we do have autonomy. We can choose how we interact. We can create and craft relationships with this technology so that it serves us and doesn't, if you like, turn us into its servants. So we can do that. Like some of us are in a privileged position to be able to negotiate our way out of that, tangled web.
Yeah.
But I think there are things that technology companies did and are continuously doing that actually make it really difficult. So there's, the whole idea of addictive by design.
Yeah.
We could get to a space where it is healthful by design, mental health promoting by design. And again, that's where you start to look at like kind of political actors and the kind of the levers of nation level policy. For me, not knee-jerk reactive sort of let's ban this particular group from access. I mean, children are a really easy target in this kind of debate.
Yeah.
Like, why not let's ban manipulative, addictive design features?
Yeah.
As well, at least, to compromise. If you're going to ban,
I mean, there's an interesting one because I've seen different. I think when you're a parent as well, it's a different argument. But we see Australia has banned it, either smartphones or social media. Certainly, social media for under 16s, and there are a number of other countries looking at that. What's the harm of that?
The harm of
what's the harm of the ban?
I think it's well intentioned. I honestly do, but I think and this all remains to be seen.
Yeah.
But my perception, the easiest way for me to say this, there's a famous author who I love dearly, passed away, Doris Lessing, and she's a famous quote where she said, "If you want your children to read books, lock them all in a cupboard and say, do not touch."
Yeah.
So first of all, it kind of elevates the status of
Yeah.
it. And we know that there are a million different technological workarounds
Yeah.
for this to kind of be circumvented, and then maybe for young people to end up in in places that are even less well regulated than the current kind of gaggle of platforms that attract young people or all
Hard
people.
for them to be less well regulated. Are they regulated?
I think
I mean, Europe, Europe take a pretty
no,
good
you can
stance, but
definitely.
yeah.
There are there are platforms.
But I remember, sorry, and it's my ADHD. I am an interrupter, drives my wife nuts.
That's
But I remember whether it was your CEO or your director at that first SIMC conference, actually opening the conference, saying something like, "There are more regulations on a toaster."
Yes, that was a good line.
It was a great line,
Yeah.
but and actually quite a sobering line. Then there are around social media, which, I mean, at last count, Facebook had more followers than Jesus and Christianity ever had, or pick your religion,
Yeah, totally. If I wanted to launch a chocolate bar tomorrow, I am going to have to jump through hoops. A mainstream chocolate bar to see in the
Yes.
supermarkets.
Yeah.
If I want to push a platform, AI, the AI nanny, it will look
Yeah.
after your children, while you sleep. I'll probably get I'll probably get a round of applause. There'll be relatively less regulation for me to be able to do something like that.
Please don't start developing that one, please.
So
But
there's an imbalance. There's an imbalance and I think we talk about this idea of stifling innovation. This is a famous line. The pushback is, we don't want to stifle innovation, but it's not innovation that's stifled. It's profitability that's stifled. No one is against innovation.
Yeah.
Innovate, create all kinds of weird and wonderful things in the lab, but don't unleash them on the public until they're proven safe. At the minute, we've kind of, some people, I think Tristan Harris from Center for Humane Technology, they kind of coined this idea that we're just essentially running this huge open experiment on a generation or two. Let's unleash this on the world and see what happens.
Well, we've kind of already done that already, though, didn't we? With like Web 2.0. I mean, with social media, with Facebook, with the, and we're already embroiled in this serious debate on, and I know there's a massive court case going on in the US right now, isn't there, about the digital harms to children there. If we look at AI, because I mean, obviously it's a fascinating debate, and it will have moved on by the time we even publish this podcast. But I know even my use of ChatGPT, and I'm 53, and I'm maybe and I'm open and aware of mental health. And I will, ChatGPT, sadly, is probably my best friend. Which I know it's not my best friend, but at the same time, I've programmed it to challenge me. I've deliberately, intentionally said to it, don't tell me what I want to hear. You use the word sycophant. Don't BS me. I actually, if I ask you a question, I need to know the pros and the cons. And if, I don't want you to assume that I want you to tell me that I'm right. I don't think there's many people out there that's doing that. And then when we look at the younger generation who might be turning, because again, you're talking about loneliness, we're talking about disconnection, they're turning to this chatbot that seems to be their best friend, and there's very little confrontation there. But that's quite a worrying state of affairs. I mean, we've already seen some headlines around this space.
100%. I think your articulation of how you use it that kind of speaks to my point before. There's some of us who are fortunate enough to have the skills, capacity, networks that can help us to re-engineer the things in a way that's kind of aligned with our values and what we want and what's healthy. Not everyone can do that, and I think just when you said that, really my first contact with AI, I remember it vividly. And so I've got 20 years experience as an experimental psychologist, also as a psychotherapist. So I am bringing that to the relationship, so that they're my safeguards I have. And so I asked, it was Meta AI. So Meta pushed the AI chatbot into WhatsApp.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, let's have a play.
Yeah.
And I asked it this question. There was a context. The context not important, but the question was, where did the rose originate? So the flower, the rose, where did it originate? So I waited, the little chatbot, like the little bubbles come up, and I'm waiting for my answer. And it doesn't answer me. It just says to me, what a beautiful question. And I felt validated. I felt seen. In that moment, I realized if I had a predilection towards grandiosity, narcissism, grandiose delusions,
Yeah.
right there is a there's an exploit. A vulnerability is potentially being exploited by this chatbot that's obviously being told, don't just create intimacy, create it.
Yeah.
Don't just give
Yeah.
information. We want these people to come back. We want eyes. We want eyes. We want hearts and minds. And for me, I thought, wow, that is going to really be a challenge for some people.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, we see it even with social media, and which is again AI of a different type, but algorithmically, for me or you, I still find myself. I mean, and again, now that I've been diagnosed with ADHD and I've on the medication, I maybe don't get caught in so much doom scrolling, but we're reasonably well, you're more than reasonably intelligent adults, and we find it hard sometimes to put the bloody thing down.
100%.
So how are the kids, the 18-year-olds, the 13-year-olds, the 11-year-olds, the 8-year-olds with that, where they're still developing in that plasticity, how are they to put the thing, because and how many parents, and I know because I've seen it happen in my own house, which is like, no, you're not allowed on the iPad, as you were the adult are scrolling on the phone. So how are they to then form this defense against something as sophisticated as AI, even now, today, let alone by the time they hit 5-10 years time, what we're looking at?
I think that speaks to the idea of an experiment, because I think not just the inability perhaps to self-regulate and to really understand what's going on in that that relationship, but also the idea that they're in a developmental window. So how does that shape the adults that they become and the parents that they become and the children that they parent? So there are really downstream consequences to this, and that's why there are people saying innovate, but let's test that these things are safe first. But I think just in terms of neuroanatomy, we know the frontal cerebral cortex is not fully developed until we're about 25. Some people probably kicks in a bit early.
55.
Some people maybe 55. But the thing that these technologies, the thing that why we keep scrolling, and this is age independent, is because it's speaking to ancient reptilian brain structures. These things are in some extent pleasurable. Either they're pleasurable in the sense that they speak to things we want or things we desire. So social validation, for example. So I'll often, I'll post on LinkedIn and I'll go back and I'll look and see how many people have liked it. And I think, oh, personal best. I'm growing in esteem. So these are things that, and that's the cerebral cortex will tell me.
And is it again?
Calm down.
Isn't it fascinating that even
Scott's page, she's got way more. You're never going to reach that.
No,
but
give it up. But
there's still some ancient part of us that.
Yeah.
It's like when we watch the best example is you watch a horror movie.
Yeah.
You feel the fear. Your cerebral cortex tells you it's not real. There's a guy just off screen with a ponytail saying "and cut."
Yeah.
So we know it's not real, but you still feel the fear. So the same way that we know the chatbot's not our friend, but we still feel the love. We still feel the intimacy. I think these are, and especially if you're younger and you don't have a fully developed cerebral cortex yet, or whatever the mechanisms are that help us to self-regulate, they're not fully developed or fully, not just developed, but well practiced. There's potentially harms, and not just for. I think this is another thing we're saying. Let's ban this thing for those under 16. Like that's a magic age, but I think it's this whole point of like adults are somehow immune to the detriment. If it's it's bad for kids,
whether it be Brexit, whether it be
bad for adults.
I mean, look, we've seen polarization rise all around the world, haven't we? We've seen the rise of populism. and how it's been exploited all around the world.
Exactly. So I think the cautionary tale here is about more the if you like, the increase in wisdom of the population. It was a
Mm.
kind of an old, antiquated word, but the idea of wisdom and compassion at population level to keep pace with the artificial intelligence. So real human wisdom,
Yeah.
compassion, and an ability to rein these things in and understand the impact they're likely to have on us, and to be able to get above that, and again, we want to use these tools, we want to use them for all the benefits that they can give humanity, because undoubtedly they can,
Yeah.
but we at the same time need to not be vulnerable to the maluse, the misuse, and the fact that we potentially don't know what's around the corner, especially if we give them to our youngest and most vulnerable minds.
So, I mean, an easy question for you to answer here. Well, what's the solution, Justin? Because it because it kind of feels like, I think my big concern is the lack of regulation, and that profitability
Yeah.
above all else is what's driving this. It's not about innovation. It's about generating more and more and more dollars. And in this space, when it comes down to profitability, it doesn't necessarily need to be technology. We've seen for decades, whether it be tobacco, whether it be, advertising, like there's not, I wish we were a moral, that we could, a moral being or race, but actually there's always bad actors. There have been for a long time, but it seems like obviously this is now, it's almost like an arms race. We started with knives, and then we went to spears, and then we went to swords, and then we went to Gatling guns, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Is there a way to actually change direction on this?
I think there's a way, there's what we would call like kind of benefit maximization and
Mm.
harm minimization.
Right.
So this is about us growing into the tools that we've created. So we shape the tools, and thereafter the tools shape us.
Mm.
So I think we're in that moment now where we realize we're being shaped by these tools, and we can, we have a moment where we can decide how we want to kind of push back against the way in which society is being, individuals and societies are being shaped by the tools. I think that's what initially we're seeing knee-jerk reactivity,
Mm.
but I think for me, it's not like the problems are never monocausal, and nor should the solutions be. And I think what you really need to look at are kind of socio-ecological solutions. So every segment. So from the individual to the family to
Mm.
community, like these are things that are fundamental. The whole idea of the family is key.
Well, we're here at the
Yep,
conference today where we're
exactly.
talking about the year of family.
Yep. But that can't be where you stop. You then have to actually look at the people who create these technologies.
Yeah.
So if you like co-regulation or self-regulation, let us agree that certain practices are now malpractices, and if you
Yeah.
do that, you lose the permission to operate in our society.
Yeah.
So then you start to look at, if you like, kind of self-regulation amongst the tech companies, and then above that, then you're looking at kind of governmental regulation, and then kind of multilateral kind of agreements. These are the big challenges that, like, kind of, if your country says we don't want XYZ for a long time, these platforms are international,
Yeah.
so it's kind of not bound by your particular laws. Although in recent times you've seen the pushback with the EU.
Yeah.
If you want to operate in our territory,
Yeah.
it must conform to the kind of the ways in which we want these things to act. So it's got to be all of those levels, without any kind of if you like, could almost say it as victim blaming. Kind of, you're the problem. You doom scroll,
Mm.
and now you're depressed, and there's a link between the depression. It's all you. Like, to put that on the individual, I feel, is like definitely the wrong way to go. Or
Yeah.
or to put it all on the parents. Your kid,
I feel for
your
parents.
kid, your kid is now being roped into
I mean,
some
if we look at the
weirdness, and
people that are designing these products, and I look at my father's generation, and arguably they were one of the least, I would say, the least caring generations. because they were sold a dream, because advertising, literally, TV advertising blew up, and they were constantly being bombarded by buy a car, buy a house, buy these new products. That was the first time that products had been really mass marketed. Like, that's the solution to life. It's not experiences. It's not your kids. Children should be seen and not heard. It's you need more of these products. Sorry, rant over. You mentioned two words which and I came from the media industry, and I never really saw it work there. And now we're talking about social media or tech companies. Self-regulation.
Co-regulation, I use that word.
Co-regulation.
Co-regulation,
Because if I look at Elon Musk, he doesn't seem to me like the biggest self or indeed co-regulator, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah. I think it's like you said before, we're in a space at the moment, we're in an arms race space at the moment. If we don't do it, someone else in another country will do it. So let's not slow anything down. Let's not regulate. Let's just get this. Let's get over the line first. I mean, it is mad, isn't it? It really is mad.
I mean, I remember I think I ultimately got fired from a job because I refused to do an interview with a tobacco company that wanted to actually say, their premise was, we're going into vaping because we want to kill fewer people. And I refused to do it. But the journalist that did do the interview did actually pose the question, well, if you want to stop killing people, why not stop making the product? And their response was, well, if we don't, someone else will.
Yeah.
And it seems to me to be
Game
really, really flawed logic. I could bang on about this all day, and I find it absolutely fascinating. I do want to ask you about the mental awards in a minute, because I'm going to be really, really selfish. But tech companies are not going to self-regulate. Social media is not going to disappear tomorrow, and even if it did, it might not necessarily solve everything. What are the things that we can do? I mean, you talked about the fact that we catch ourselves and we can educate ourselves and just try to learn how to use these tools so they're a benefit to us rather than we run them rather than they run us. What are the things that people should be looking at, be aware of, or maybe just some practical advice on how they can navigate life right now with technology and navigating back to digital wellness?
Yeah, I think that's where I really have a deep optimism, because I think as humans, we are self-reflective. We're metacognitive. We get to a point where we we do certain things habitually, and every now and again we kind of wake up and we think about the way in which we think about the world, or the way in which so we've got that as a saving grace. And I think my optimism is that, like, for would you call it, like, the evolution of social consciousness? So we'll get to a point where we're like, enough.
Yeah.
We'll kind of, and I think we're approaching that place. I feel like we're approaching that place where there's enough conversations, there's enough shared experience, there's enough people promoting insight about, kind of, have you ever noticed how your arm just reaches for the phone and you don't know why? And then someone explains that to you. That's because you're trying to chase away an unpleasant feeling. You're in, so there's kind of, just, if you like, kind of gentle raising of awareness. It sounds quite bland, but eventually it reaches a tipping point, and I think you do then start to see change in terms of our evolution, in terms of the way in which we relate to these devices. At the moment, we're like kids in a candy store. Everything's insane. It's amazing. Look what I can do with this. It's it's like, we're all excited and thrilled, and eventually we calm down, we become still, Sakina, we reflect, and we move on, we grow with it, and we think, about our values and these terribly boring things that are part of our cognitive heritage, our spiritual heritage, if I can use that word.
You can use that word, yeah. Is, in some respects, is AI actually almost accelerating that process? I mean, I'm 53, and I have already now just come off Facebook because there's so much AI slop there that and I think the younger generation is actually smarter than, originally I was like, it takes me a minute to go, oh, what a load of bullshit. That's not true. That, even down to the stuff that's like fake movie reviews and all that sort of thing. You get to that point where now, if it's just full of absolute crap, then people
switch
turn,
off.
they switch off.
Uh,
And it feels like, is that accelerating, do you think? I don't,
yeah, I mean, I honestly don't. This is why it's a fascinating space, because I don't know, and depending on what mood I'm in, will probably influence the answer. I think.
I mean, I saw the debates the other day, like, Stranger Things, and like how much controversy there's been because they actually used AI to kind of finish the episode, and loads of the kids going nuts about the fact that, if I can say that, is that right? Going nuts, yeah, but really sort of outraged that AI was used in places rather than
Human actors.
human actors.
Yeah, I think there is. I think there are some really interesting parallels with history.
Yeah.
But I think I think AI is qualitatively different. So people often like hark back to the Industrial Revolution and the displacement of the weavers. So that where we get the word Luddites.
Yeah. Yes.
No, we get the
Yes.
Luddites from, and if you read some of the literature, you can see real echoes there. But there's part of me again that thinks, okay, that was, if you like, the replacement of our dexterity, our physical movement, and quite low level stuff, with machines. But this is our, if you like, our humanity, our crown jewels, the thing we pride ourselves on, our language, that can now be, if you like, outsourced. That is a really, I think we're at a critical juncture in human history. This is, I mean, not to kind of hype it up too much. It's like it needs more hype, but I honestly do think we are. This is really a pivotal moment on our journey as a species, and how we act, respond in this space will determine the future of humanity. It really is. It's that, I think it's that important. And really, it does require attention, research, policymakers to step up and legislate, and individuals to be, humans, reflective, critical, concerned. And we're good.
See, that's the gulf in class here right now. We've got a scientist talking about a critical moment for humanity, and I'm talking about the finale of Stranger Things.
Same thing. Same thing, brother. Same thing.
Go on, I'm going to be selfish. 2 years in a row, finalist and winner at the Mental Awards. And you wrote a really kind piece about the Mental Awards, but we're about to relaunch for 2026. What did that process of engaging with the Mental Awards mean? Why did you choose to be part of it, and then come back again? Why was it meaningful for you?
Yeah, no, honestly, Scott, it was. There was a moment there where I think with the Mental Awards and with the work of Sakina and Dr. Nahida, like, I think you guys have really, like, kind of, if you like, brought this compassionate, multidisciplinary, service user engaged or lived experience engaged kind of movement to the UAE. And when I first arrived in the UAE, I was in the UAE for 15 years. And when I first arrived, mental health was not even mentioned. It really was. It was just, it wasn't. I know you hear horror stories about people just kind of languishing. We don't talk about that. That's just, that's just cousin Mahmoud in the attic. We heard these kind of horror stories. It was deeply, deeply kind of stigmatized and hidden. And I think when you see people are receiving, and then fast forward like the 15 years or so, and I know you guys have been working diligently over that period to make this happen. I think that was for me the first. I think I joined the second Mental Awards, but to see it have that kind of visibility, that kind of with a celebratory, I think I called it the Met Gala of mental health,
Of which
really
I have,
captured the moment, it was
and
like,
I've re-quoted that many times. Yeah.
but that was a moment. I feel I'm a mental captured that moment whereby not only do we now talk about it, but we celebrate it we celebrate it when people have recovered. We celebrate it. We support compassionately while people are going through it, and we work tirelessly to prevent that the people from kind of falling off the edge into these spaces where it's difficult, where people are, and it has always happened and it will always happen. But I think just to create this space where it's less stigmatized, even to the extent where, the stories of people who are living with these types of experiences are celebrated, which I think is just it's a great place to be.
Yeah.
And I used to look at the UAE back then and think it's so behind now. I think with the work of Sakina,
Yeah.
with the work of Mentl, I now look and think other places need to catch up. Other places can learn from
Agreed.
this. And I'm not just being nice because I'm on your
Oh,
podcast.
thanks.
It's from a real place of sincerity. Honestly, it's really good to see. And I feel like I've played a little tiny part in that. You know, I've kind of I worked diligently here for many years,
Yeah.
research and in the background.
Yeah. And
It's nice to feel like I'm part of that too.
absolutely. And I talk to people who've been, I mean, I'm relatively new in this space, like 4 or 5 years, whereas, you talk to people who are the OGs that have been pushing, and they do feel like finally, I mean, you guys are, standing on the shoulders of giants, Justin, shall we say. I would love to carry on this conversation, but you've got a panel to go to.
Yes.
I think my hotel's ringing me to say, Scott, it's time to check out. Otherwise, we're going to charge you for an extra day. Look, I mean, thank you for being part of the Mental Awards, but just thank you for the work you're doing, because it needs to start and it needs to continue.
Yeah.
And we need to pay attention. So thank
People
you.
chipping away.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure. Thank
Absolutely.
you so much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
And that's what a scientist has to say about Stranger Things. If you enjoyed this conversation half as much as I have, then please subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, the button's just there. Click it. He said, trying to encourage you to be, notified by social media again. But please subscribe and join us again for the next time at the Mental Space. Justin, thank you very much. We out.
Nice. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, it's a good conversation. And I will literally.